evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, great scholars, great leaders. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so looking forward to be addressed, to be empowered and inspired by my sister, Dr. Claudelle. I will be introducing her shortly. My name is Mazwe Majola. I'm from the Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development. We are here to develop leaders, to empower leaders, to inspire leaders. We are here to produce world-class leaders. We are here to encourage each other. Especially, we meet here every Wednesdays as leaders. This is the community of leaders. This is where leaders talk to other leaders. Peers talk to other peers. We meet here to encourage each other, to correct each other, to challenge each other, to inspire each other, to admonish each other as leaders, because we believe that leadership, it's everything and everything is leadership. If you want to fix our country, if you want to fix our institutions, if you want to fix our families, if you want to fix ourselves as individuals, leadership is the key, because everything revolves around leadership. That's why we meet every Wednesdays here with great leaders from all over the place, all over the continent, and even abroad from different countries, where we meet here and discuss leadership. We meet every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And yes, we've got great leaders, people from or other academics from different universities. We've got politicians, we've got members of the media, we've got executives from private sector, from public sector. We've got community leaders, religious leaders, professionals from all walks of life. We just meet here to discuss leadership. Welcome to our members and our regulars, men and women who are here almost every Wednesdays. We learn a lot from each other, as we always hear. Yeah, we always hear, and really we inspire each other, because the participants who are here are great leaders. That's why I say it's leaders talking to other leaders. A special welcome to those colleagues who are joining us for the first time. If we are here for the first time, you are most welcome, and please do participate, feel at home. This is a safe space. It's a community of leaders. As I said, we are here for the reason and for the purpose. As long as you're a leader, you belong here. The question will be, if it's your first time, where have you been? Because that's where great leaders meet. But because this platform is very contagious, I know that there is no, you will not come back again. So thank you so much. Tonight, we are hosting our sister. It's not the first time she's here. She's very familiar with our platform. She has addressed us before, and I'm so glad that she availed herself in the midst of her busy schedule, but she respectfully availed herself to address us tonight. I'm so humbled. I'm so grateful to her, because I know she's a very, very busy person. But yeah, as I'm saying that, she has really addressed us before in this platform. Actually, she's contributing. She has contributed a chapter to our new book. That's part of advertising our book there, Dr. Claudelle. So actually, this book, you'll be surprised when we launch it. The contributors who are here, I'm actually, even myself, I'm so scared that, wow, wow, what a book that we will be launching in a very near future. It's called The Power of Leadership, or rather, The Power of Women in Leadership. So we've got powerful women and men. Really, that's very interesting. And men who have contributed the chapters in this book. So Dr. Claudelle has got a chapter there in this book. She's a well-known person, but just to say a few things, she's an experienced executive and non-executive director. Dr. Claudelle has served on numerous international and local oversight bodies and committees, including board. She's a member of ESCOM board as well, and many other companies. Her academic qualifications include BA from VETS, Business Management Diploma, and Master in Business Leadership from UNISA, Graduate School of Business Leadership, and MCOM from UJ, and doctorate from UJ as well. She is a well sought after keynote panelist and moderator who aims to bring depth, insight, and contribute to the success of any event that is there. She's a well-versed in various topics which related to leadership, governance, and ethics. Tonight, she's addressing us on three-dimensional leadership, trusting topic in leadership. You'll be here about it, or you'll hear about it tonight. Three-dimensional leadership needs sight. That is Dr. Claudelle van Eck, ladies and gentlemen. My sister, once again, thank you so much for availing yourself. As I said, you and I know that how busy you are, how busy you are. That's why I'm saying in public that I really appreciate you and respect you. We admire you, the work you do, not only in this country or in this nation, but internationally. And yeah, that's why we called you to come and mingle again amongst these great leaders and academics that is here, as you've done it again. So you can address us now, my sister. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Claudelle van Eck. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. I was smiling when you say, I know how busy I am. I'm like, hey, there's an audit committee pack waiting for me, audit committee meeting tomorrow. But it is part of the course. I really appreciate the opportunity, though, to come in and share a few thoughts with you and hopefully engage in conversation. I'm going to try to not be too long, but rather leave some thoughts for us to chew on and to engage and have a conversation around. I found that in recent times, I'm finding myself more and more reflecting on lots of dilemmas and leadership dilemmas. And, you know, leadership is such a broad topic. And when you're asked to speak about leadership, it's, you're like, okay, so what part of leadership are we going to be talking about? And so I'm hoping that the lens that I'm bringing through today would help you to maybe just see a little more things in terms of where you are. And Prof, as I'm talking, I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and if you can just let me know that you are able to see it, that would help me on my side. You can see it, great. Okay, so let's just get it into presentation mode. Right, and I was saying to the good Prof earlier on that Zoom has flipped on me, and I'm very unhappy about it because I used to be able to put the presentation behind me as a virtual background, but here we are. The topic that I chose to speak to today is really based on the law of three. And so if you were to go right down to the atom, you've got three components in the atom. And if you look across the universe, three is such an important number. And when we come down to self, you can see the three there as well. So that's one of the things that I've been reflecting quite a bit on recently is how does the law of three apply to leadership, and how does one see that play out in the various dilemmas that we sometimes have to deal with this as leaders? And so I'm hoping that you do have a pen and paper with you, because I am going to ask you to do a little bit of work as I am presenting to you. And the reason why I'm doing that is I need us to really think deeply about our own personal spheres in terms of where we are. And so when we look at leadership, I'm really looking through to three different components. The one is leadership in the organization, leadership of team, and leadership of self. And of course, for some of us, it may mean when we're looking at organization, there may be multiple organizations. You may be sitting on different boards. In team, we all have various teams that we're part of, whether it is leading our team as well as being part of the executive, or whether it is being part of the board in one organization and being part of an executive in another organization. We all have multiple layers. And when we look at the various layers, it's very easy for us to almost start to settle into a way of looking at self. And thinking that this is the way I lead, and often we don't see how things shift around us and why it is so important for us to be able to see. And this is where sight comes in for me. So when I say that three-dimensional leadership, in other words, the dimension of organization, the dimension of team, the dimension of self, needs sight, what I am actually saying is it is our ability to first of all bring into focus and to be aware of what is in front of us, and then being able to think through very deeply so that we can land in a space where we need to land in, which has become more and more difficult. One can almost say that these days attention is become a very rare commodity, because our attention is split into so many different directions, and especially if one thinks about 2025 with everything that's happening globally, that splintering of the attention is an inevitable consequence of the environment within which we find ourselves. So your ability in all of that to have sight, and that is to see what is happening, to see the various components for me is really becoming an overarching skill. Right? So even before we start to talk about soft skills versus technical skills versus the traditionally, and I'm putting that in inverted commas, your hard skills, that one needs to be able to see. And sight is one of those elements that when we think about it, we often just think about what it is, what we can see, what is in front of us. And I'm hoping that as we go through the various components, that I'm going to help you to start to declutter in your mind and to start to see a little more in the various components. Because we have limited time today, I wanted to single out two of the components that I know for sure would affect everybody in the room. I am not necessarily, I'm not aware of where everybody is sitting. So the conversation I would want to focus on around team and around self in relation in terms of leadership. Organization, I'm going to park, because typically that's the conversation that we have when we have influence and decision-making power in terms of where the organization as an entity is going, its impact within the context within it find itself. But when I'm talking about the team, some of those things you would already be able to transpose if you are a board member, for example, or you're sitting on an executive team, or you're the CEO. You can already start to transpose that onto the organization and pull some of those things through and start to use those things that we talk about in team to increase sight in terms of organization. But let me just put this down as a last thought around organization before I completely park organization. And this is that it is so important that we see, that we have sight in terms of the underlying philosophies that drive the way we see organization. So if you are just day before yesterday, I was in conversation with somebody, very senior individual, and we're talking about decisions being made and how different board members have been tackling certain issues. And I said, you can clearly see what's coming through in terms of those who are more left-leaning and those who are more centrist or business leaning, right? So the capitalist in terms of, and I'm going to very clearly define it in terms of how capitalism, what capitalism has become today. Because if you compare capitalism today to what it was in the early 1970s, it's two different animals. And it's so that if that is your underlying philosophy, you're looking through that lens, your sight is going to be limited as a result of that lens. Similarly, if you have more socialism leanings, that lens that you look through is going to give you sight. So understanding the limitations of the underlying philosophy or the underlying belief system in how we see organization and how we're going to steer organizations within the broader context in terms of society. Okay, but let me park that one, because that's a deep conversation on its own. We only have so much time. So I want for us to focus today. I'm just going to focus on team and self, and I'm going to take the law of three through the team and the self as well. So we're going to look through three categories. If you've got a pen and paper, I would encourage you to, and you can use this diagram or you can use whatever you want to use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first look at team. I'm going to talk about team internal. I'm going to talk about team external. I'm going to talk about team in terms of systemic interconnections. And I'm going to talk about self in the system, self external, self internal. So you can see the three coming through for those two categories that we will be zeroing in today. And use this as a dipstick assessment for you. On a scale from 1 to 5 in each one of those categories, I want you to rate your team and then rate yourself when we get there. But don't just off the bat start rating yourself. For each one of those categories, I'm going to take you through some thought processes. And then I'm going to ask you to, okay, now, where would you rate your team? And think about what it is and that we would need to shift within that context. I hope you got it, right? So very simply, let me quickly repeat. We're only going to focus on team and self. I'm going to start with the team and I'll go to self. I'm going to, for each one, the team and the self, I'm going to go through three broad categories using the law of three. But then in each one of those categories, you're going to rate your team, and you're going to rate self later on when we get to that. And it would be out of 1 to 5. 1 is like it's really bad. Lots of work to do. 5, excellent. But please, I remind you again, wait until I tell you, okay, now it's time to rate yourself, because you may jump to 5 and after I'm done with you, you may come down to 1. Okay. I also want you to just think about when we're talking about team, think about a team that you want to focus on, because I've already said earlier on, I'm pretty sure all of you are part of multiple teams. For the purposes of this exercise, I need you to choose one team. Right, so don't jump teams. So if you find that with the first one, oops, we're not doing well, maybe I should choose another team, then you're going to do yourself a disservice, right? Choose one team. It could be the team you're leading. It could be the exco that you're part of, the manco that you're part of, the board that you're part of, but just one that we're going to work on. Right, so let's start with the team first. And the first category and where I want you to rate your team is an internal focus. So almost think about it as if you were to look at your team as one organism. There's stuff that's happening inside that organism. So we're taking an inward look. And then we ask a few questions about the team. Do we truly understand each other? And when we're talking about understanding each other, it is more than just I know that Dr. Boule is an extrovert or an introvert. I see you. It's far more than that. It is our ability to, within the context of the team, to see each other, sight, and seeing each other is taking in considerations like we're not just looking at people's behaviors. We have an understanding of what motivates people. Like, and very similar to that concept that I was talking about earlier on how you're going to steer organization, how you're going to see organization is going to be dependent on the underlying philosophy. What motivates people? Right. So let me give you an example to illustrate my point. Right. So you may find that a Claudelle is very particular about us making sure that things are done the right way. Right. And what is externally displayed is people would think about it as being pedantic or perfectionism. The next person may display the same behaviors. But for the two, the motivation may be very, very different. For the one person, the motivation is things must be done right because I believe the world is imperfect. And for me, it is important that we bring perfection into the world. Therefore, we must do things the right way. For the other person, it may very well be, we must make sure that we do this the right way because there's a ripple effect if we don't do things the way we need to, and it will have an impact beyond us as a team. See, two different motivations, same behavioral aspects that you may see displayed. So when I say motivations within the team, do we have a real understanding of what it is that drive each other in the team? Do I understand the core fears within the team? Right? So I'll give you another example. For Claudelle, for example, and this is true story, really important to me that I know stuff, that I come across as competent. My fear is coming across as incompetent, and that may play out in lots of different ways. But if I feel that I am being threatened or exposed as I don't know stuff, I may have an emotional reaction. Whereas for somebody else, the core fear may be something completely different. So if we understand each other in the team, we can start to see how the team is gelling together. We understand each other's triggers. So what would be a trigger for Claudelle? An absolute trigger for Claudelle is do not lie to Claudelle. Claudelle doesn't like it. Claudelle's the kind of person who, if you tell her you killed somebody, she'll go, okay, let's see where we're going to bury the body. But if you come to Claudelle and say everything is honky-dory and she finds out there is a body, she is going to have a credenza. And so that's a trigger for Claudelle. Do we understand the triggers within the team? So if we're thinking about looking internally, do we understand how the various dynamics of the different motivations, the different triggers, the different fears create a picture of internally of that team? And to what degree are we able to work with what we've got, right? So the awareness of the natural default position. So a natural default position for Claudelle, for example, is in conflict. If she doesn't see any value in dealing with it, she will withdraw. It's a natural default, unless she pulls herself out of it, right? And is there proactive counteraction of collective blind spots, right? So let me give you an example. If you have a certain dominance within the team, or say, let's use Claudelle's natural default position to withdraw. If that is a dominant factor within the team, we can do it without realizing that we're doing it as a team, and that becomes a blind spot for us. If we're aware of that potential blind spot, we could have proactive counteractions in place to make sure that our blind spots don't trip us as a team. But for us to get there, we absolutely need to have a very deep understanding of what that team looks like internally. In other words, we need to have absolute sight, which is not an easy thing to do when you're constantly working at a fast pace. And here's where the leader needs to play a very important role of helping the team to start to see, to bring that sight to the team. Some teams have the ability to come to that, especially when you've got a high level of maturity. But if you have a low level of maturity, or you've got mixed maturity in the team, the leader's role in bringing about that sight is fundamental. Right. Now, it's time to rate yourself. If you were to rate that team that you chose, and you look at the team internally, where would you rate the team? I'll give you a minute to think about it. Well, a few seconds, not a minute is long in a webinar. Right, I'm going to move on. So the next category that we're going to talk about is the team external, right? So now we've looked at the team internally. Now let's look at the team externally, right? Do we have agreement within the team about the team's purpose? And I am not talking about the team's function. It's quite different to purpose. Why is it that we exist? In other words, ultimately, what is the impact that we make as a team within the bigger picture where we find ourselves, or the bigger context within which we find ourselves? So if I were to ask you, to allow me to go and have coffee with all the team members of that team that you selected. And I have a conversation with each one of them, and I ask the question, what is the purpose of this team? Will I get a coherent response from all of them? And would I get a consistent response from all of them? In other words, everybody's on the same page in terms of what the purpose of the team is, right? And the inward expression, that inward focus that we have now, that outward expression in the purpose, you can see alignment between what's happening internally and that outward expression in terms of purpose. The other question that I'm going to ask you is, do you think, if you were to look at the team, and now imagine you're all sitting around the table, right? So you're all sitting around the boardroom, and you were to look at each one of those team members individually, do you think that you all have a very good understanding of the interest of stakeholders? In other words, you have sight, you have the ability to see. Now, this may sound like it's an easy answer, but when you really sit down and think about it, it is not as easy as it looks. Because what is the interest of stakeholders? Unless we have made the effort to look through the lens of the other. And here we need to understand that with absolute clarity, that my reality and your reality is not the same. And this is one of those difficult things for us as human beings sometimes to come to terms with, is the understanding that the way that I experience the world, the way that when I show up in the world, what I perceive, what I see, what I feel, how I respond is not the same as the person next to me's experience. And even more so for those groupings of people who are not in my immediate sphere. And when I say immediate sphere, I'm talking about the groupings that we tend to identify with. Those are the ones that we belong to, right? So my community, my culture, my subculture, because there's cultures and subcultures, a subculture within the organization and so forth. That the further away the stakeholders are from the reality that I experience, the more attuned we need to be to the fact that they are experiencing a completely different reality. And therefore, I cannot decide for myself that my stakeholder Victor's reality is X because I am judging his reality from the vantage point of my reality. So if we understand that concept, we then have the ability, or I shouldn't even say ability is something that you build over time. It's a skill I struggle with daily. Is you then have the invitation to take a step back and to ask with curiosity, what does the lens of the other look like? What does the reality of the other look like? And therefore, and from there, be able to ask, what is the interest of the other? So we don't judge the interest of the stakeholders from our position of reality, but we create understanding of the interest of the stakeholders from their reality. So if you were to look around the table, that team of yours, and you were to ask the question, if we were to look at a full list of stakeholders of this team, does this team as a collective have an understanding, a real deep understanding with sight of the various stakeholders? So the other would be is question that I'll ask is, from there then, do you have a collective strategy in managing your stakeholders? So, and when I say collective strategy, is like everybody's on the same page in terms of how we're going to manage the stakeholders, but it has to be built on top of the deep understanding of the interest, right? So we have the ability to, when we think, so one of the things that I like to mention when I talk about ethics, for example, and when you think about the decisions, the impact of the decisions and the actions of the organization or the team, is to be able to see the harm. But you can, that may be caused, right? And that would bring you to the essence of the ethics, is where the harm may be caused. But you can only determine harm through the lens of the other, the reality of the other. Because in my reality, something may not be harmful, but in the reality of somebody else's reality, it may be harmful. So this is exactly the same concept here. So let's look around the table and look at your team members and ask this question. Can you see a collective strategy in managing stakeholders that there's absolutely clarity about who they are, about what is important to them, why it is important to them, what motivates them, why something may be harmful for them, why that interest is an interest, and how do we deal with that? Right. I'm pausing here for a second so that you can think about how you're going to rate your team in this dimension. Right. And I'm coming to the last section of the team, and that is thinking about team in terms of systemic interconnections. And often what happens with teams is that they tend to think very narrowly, only in terms of what it is that they need to deliver and to whom, but not necessarily deep enough around the touch points within the organization that the team has. And I'm talking about the collective here. So collective self-awareness. It's not just about the team leaders' awareness of the team in the system, which is often what you find is, say if it's the finance team, for example, the CFO is the one who builds relationships with the other executives, and that CFO is the one essentially holds the awareness of the team in terms of the full system. What you want to get to is collective self-awareness in this system, right? And collective self-awareness starts with an understanding of and being able to see where all the touch points are. And those touch points would be primary, secondary, and so forth, right? Where the ripples go. So what we do what decisions we make, how far they go, is to be able to see the full system, the full ecosystem, and our impact within the full ecosystem. Right? And then the team's ability to adapt. So when we can see the ripples within the full system, and to see whether we are having a positive impact throughout the system, or whether we're having a negative or a net negative impact within the overall system, that we're able to adapt, but also being aware of how the system is changing and how we need to adapt within the system. And it's almost it's something that you would want to get to in terms of team maturity as almost intuitive. And I'll be naughty for a second and bring my dancing in as an illustration, just because I danced last night. I love my dancing. So I dance ballroom and Latin. I dance with my own partner. I dance with my instructor. His name is Tony. Tony and I have been together for almost 24 years now, and the partnership is built over the years to a point where we're interpreting the music together. And it's the hearing of the music and the rhythm in the music and interpreting it together into a language. And often I can feel where Tony is going even before Tony knows where he's going. Because what happens is Tony's body is responding in terms of interpretation to the music. Claudelle's body feels it, and Claudelle's body responds to that. So if you think about that as an analogy within the context of the organization, the team within the organization, it is the team's ability to hear the music and to be able to hear when the music is changing from waltz to salsa. And that when the drum beat changes, the dance step adapts. But it becomes a collective self-awareness within the system, as opposed to one head honcho deciding, the CFO deciding when we need to change step modes. And when you have that, then you've got a real adaptiveness within the team, and you're able to start to create beautiful pictures. So I'm going to pause there for a second, and my question to you is, given the context that I've put in front of you in terms of collective self-awareness in the team and your systemic interconnections, where would you rate that team that you selected at the beginning out of 5? Right, so now I'm going to go to the realm of self. And I'm once again going to do internal, external, and the system, right? So remember, we're working with the law of 3 here. The first is I'm going to talk about the self-internal. And I'm really, to a large extent, drawing from not just my own experiences, but what I see in my coaching practice, what I see when I'm working with teams. Very, very senior people struggling with this. It's important to be able to make the distinction between self-knowledge, your own reality, and I talked about reality of self versus the other earlier on. Distinguishing between self-knowledge, self-awareness, and self-regulation. And let me explain what I mean. So self-knowledge is really coming from your ability to see yourself and to see as much as you possibly can see. And I'm saying as much as you possibly can see because we also need to be aware in the process of our limitations in our ability to see ourselves. Like I often say, I can't see myself. I can't see myself in the moment. I cannot see myself the way you're seeing me now as we're having this conversation. I know that I'm only consciously aware of about 10 to 12% of what's going on in my mind. So the rest is sitting in my subconscious mind. So actually, as I'm sitting here now, I have no idea how much of what is sitting in my conscious mind is driving what I decide to tell you today, to allow to come through my mouth. I'm also aware of the fact that there are more cells in my body that are not human than human cells, right? So I know that there's bacteria living inside of me, and on top of me, there's fungi and so forth. I know that when the fungi candida decide to go into overgrowth, it may make me crave for sugar. It's not me, it's that stuff that's craving for sugar. Right, so I'm just giving you like a physical example, but then there's also what is happening in the mind. The other thing that I'm also aware of is that there is this thing called infantile amnesia, which essentially speaks to when you're a little person, your brain did not hold on to all the memories because you were growing, and so your brain was still growing. So there's a lot of memories in our system that we don't consciously remember. And a lot of that may be driving how I show up today. So when we talk about self-knowledge, it's having a deep understanding of those elements that you are able to see. So I love to use I'm absolutely in love with the Enneagram. For those of you not familiar with it, it is a psychometric tool. I'm an Enneagram practitioner, see it work in my coaching practice. Beautiful. So help me to start to see myself better. I'm a 5 on the Enneagram, so like I can see the 5 tendencies, so I can see the triggers, and I know where the triggers are. So when you know all of these things, that's self-knowledge. Self-awareness, and I often hear us talk about these two things interchangeably, but they're not. Self-awareness and self-knowledge. Self-awareness for me is when you can see yourself in the moment, which is very hard for all of us most of the time. Like, so earlier today, I got a phone call. It was a difficult conversation. At some point, I could feel myself getting upset. And then I went, so what do you want me to do? And when I heard myself that, and I said it in that tone, so what do you want me to do? And all right, self-awareness in the moment, you upset, Claudelle. Okay, after the call, what about that conversation upset you? Go and find the trigger. But it is the ability to see self in the moment. And then self-regulation kicks in. And self-regulation is your ability to adjust and adapt in the moment. So when I hear that, irritation comes through the voice, and it's not appropriate at that point in time being able to pull myself back. Seeing the trigger and then pulling myself back. So really talking about self-knowledge, I find so many people in very, very senior positions still struggling with this ability to see self. This is why we've got so many bad leadership moments in organizations and beyond. Right, I'll give you a second or two to think about how you're rating yourself. And I know it's difficult sometimes to see ourselves in these kind of things as well, but out of 1 to 5, there may be room for further exploration of self. Right, so let's talk about self-external. So I've mentioned this before already, but this is now really talking about, I talked about it in the context of teams. It is in the context of self. So the degree to which you understand the multiple realities that are playing out around you in relation to you, but in understanding your impact on those realities, on the others, and understanding the harm. Right? So the ethics I mentioned earlier on is that when you say do no harm, I always say do no harm or minimize harm, because sometimes you have to minimize the harm because you can't take all the harm out of the situation. And that is when we're dealing with ethical dilemmas, right? So whether you turn right or turn left, some people are going to be harmed in the process. And this is where really difficult leadership decisions need to be made. But then we think about how do we minimize that? But to understand it, one has to understand that there are multiple realities around me, and those realities are different to my reality. And to understand that the realities are not just different in the sense of my group in relation to the other group, but there's so many different contributors to different realities. But starting off with my reality, the way I experience the world, there's nobody else in the entire world who experiences the world the way I do, because nobody has had the combination of factors that have fed into what I am and who I am today. And if one can accept that with humility, one can then make room for the other possibilities in terms of reality, and with humility understand impact and understand harm. So if I were to ask yourself to rate yourself in terms of how you're leading yourself in this context, self externally expressed, where would you rate yourself from 1 to 5? And let me go to the last category, and that is self in the overall system. And I think this one is easier for people to understand who grew up in cultures that are based in collectivism. The understanding that we're all interconnected, but if you go right back to the level of the atom, which I referred to earlier on, and you look at the atom through the lens of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, we start to see more clearly that when you talk about the concept of Ubuntu, that is absolutely correct, because we are absolutely connected. So everything interconnected within the overall field. And if one then understands that within that context that I do have a purpose, and I really want to clarify here that when I talk about purpose, I am not talking about function. I'm not talking about your job title. Because one of the mistakes that so many leaders make, and trust me, I speak from experience because I was there. The universe had to clap me sideways for me to see it, was I had to see that at some point, my identity and the role that I was in had become meshed into one. That I was no longer seeing the difference between Claudelle, the person, and the position that I was holding in the purpose of the purpose that role needed to play. So when we're talking about purpose, one has to be clear in terms of it is the I within the collective. So the purpose is not for me, the purpose is for the collective. And how do I see that purpose alignment where I am? So I think of it in terms of, I don't look for positions or things to do to advance career. I think of it in terms of, does this serve the purpose? Is there alignment with the purpose? And then having an understanding of what is the net impact of that purpose being expressed within the collective. And that in itself has got significant implications. Yeah, so I'll give you one of the implications would be that if my purpose is X within the context of the collective, then I have a responsibility to that purpose. And part of my responsibility to that purpose is to understand that the purpose gets expression through how I show up, and how I show up has lots of factors to it, and my body being one of them. So I have a responsibility to look after my body so that my body can carry the purpose. And often one sees that and especially executives become so embroiled in the the busyness and the activity, that they neglect the vessel that carries the purpose, and not understanding that looking after the vessel is as important as the delivery. So I look for examples. So when I think about workout and nutrition and looking after the body, I see it as part of the job. Part of the job is making sure the vessel can carry the purpose. All right. So if you were to rate yourself with all the context that I've given you, where would you rate yourself from 1 to 5? Right, so for some of you, and I'm just giving you, if you decided to go with a spider diagram, it may look like this for you. You may say, hey, the team terrible, only a 2. In terms of internal. External, we're doing a little better. Also a bit of a 3. When it comes to thinking about the team in terms of systemic interconnections, are we close to 0? And when I look at myself, internal, I still have a lot of work to do. I don't spend enough time looking inward and reflecting. The self-external, because I have been given lots of opportunity to grow in that area. That expression is actually fairly mature, so I'll say about a 4. There's room for improvement. Self within the system, well, I'm giving myself a 3 there. So it may look something like that. And then the question is like, now what? When we have sight, we increase our self-knowing of self. And the more we know and the more we focus, the more we can become aware. And the more we become aware, the more we can regulate. So what does self-regulation mean for you? What does self-regulation mean for your team? So you may need to reflect on those areas where I can see, I know, we need to increase our sight here, and we need to do things a bit differently within the team. How do you then take it forward? But it starts with you, right? So the sight starts with you, and then we help the others to bring about sight. Prof, I think I've said a mouthful and I want to leave a little bit of time for further reflection, and if there are any questions. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Claudelle. Powerful, very insightful. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now to engage with the speaker. You can raise your hand and then we'll acknowledge you. You can do that via chat room. Although we always encourage leaders to express themselves, it's always better as long as you remember that you. I mean, it's got time constraints, so just to be sweet and short, brief, straight to the point, so that we can give others a chance. So this is the time where you can engage with Dr. Claudelle. So, Dr. Claudelle, if I may just start there. There is this tension or conflict when it comes to self and team. The old adage, which many people still keeps that together everyone achieves more. So there's no individual in team. There's no I in the team. And then there's this, if I can call it, new thought that there's no team without an I. So the team are there, but the combination of different many eyes, then they make a team. What's your thought when it comes to that tension or that discussion?
Look, I tend to veer towards the latter, and the illustration that I like to use is that of a snowflake. So if you look at a snowflake from afar, what you see is this furry, fluffy thing. If you come closer and you look at it through a microscope, you see this beautiful crystal. But if you go even further, you see these atoms that have all come together in formation to create this picture. So you still have individuals. So the way the law of physics work is that you can break down into particles. So you can't divorce the fact that there's an atom from the snowflake, and you can't divorce the snowflake from the overall snow. You can't have a snowflake without the snow. You can't have the snowflake without the molecules. But they're not mutually exclusive. For a team to work well, the individuals need to be healthy. If you don't have healthy individuals in the team, you get a toxic team. If you've got one individual who is toxic, then you essentially can create havoc within the rest of the team. My view is you've got to look at both. So you have to look at the self and you have to look at the team. You can't take the one from the other. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's what I call it leadership with the power of and. That is not either or, but is and in both. So in leadership, if we can just understand that power of and, that whatever we do, it's about balancing polarities, and then we'll be able to understand leadership. I see another hand there from my sister Nomkita Mona. Over to you, Sister Nomkita.
Thank you, Prof. And thank you so very much to Dr. Claudelle for a very thought-provoking presentation this evening. I found myself looking at how extremely important that this work you're talking about is in the workplace, but it doesn't automatically and consciously find expression in the day-to-day course of your work. And how do you as a coach, therefore, propose that we incorporate this in a much more conscious way in our daily activities? And it's important that if you look at the quadrants that you've shown us, it is very clear that some of us are in different, we are all in different spaces depending on whether we're dealing with the internal, we're looking at the team, and we're looking at the organization. And how do we practically propose that in a workplace that has all those different people at different levels, while we are busy chasing deadlines and fighting fires, how do we consciously ensure that this kind of work is at the center? Because I believe that if we can center this kind of work, everything else could kind of, fall into place. Thank you, Prof. And thank you for a really good presentation, Doc.
Thank you. Thanks, Nomkita. And thank you for a very good question. So I'd say it really starts first, the leader themselves. As a leader, you need to bring yourself into contemplative space first. So it's far more difficult to lead others into that space if you haven't led yourself into it. So I have made it part of my lifestyle, and I am unapologetically committed to it. It's non-negotiable. Every day starts with meditation. And what I found is that when I have those moments that I make the time to go through, that I actually increase my sight incredibly. My most clear, fantastic ideas have come to me when I am in that state, because I've made space for it. And because I see the value of it, as I said, it's now it's non-negotiable. I absolutely need to do it. Then we demonstrate, when you see the value for yourself and you live it, and it's practice in your daily life, you then bring it into the team, right, and make the space for it. When you are, so it's of course easier when you have the power to do so, to bring people, to create the space for people to have those moments. Sometimes you would need to, if you don't have the skill to hold the room, to first go and get the skill, or to get somebody to come and help you to hold the room, because as a leader, you hold the space. You create the space for people to do that, to have those reflection moments. But some of the stuff you really can build into the busyness, right? So if you were to think about the stakeholder relations and thinking about the interest of the stakeholder, if you as the leader have done your own internal work in terms of, I like to call those moments my active meditation moments, where I almost look at myself on stage and look at how things are playing out, but then putting myself in the shoes of the others, the reality of the others. So if you've thought through it already, you can bring depth to the conversation. So when we are talking about the stakeholders, you can bring stuff in that help the team to go deeper, especially when you're in a team that is just numbers driven, and a team that where you have a dominant personality. And when I say dominant personality, I'm not talking about one person dominating. I'm talking about the personality of the team, the way the team collectively show up. When you have that busyness, then you look for moments that you can build it into what they are already doing. And over time, people start to see the value. And when people start to see the value, they will buy into creating more space for it. But ultimately, I'd say, don't try to create the space if you can't hold the space for yourself yet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sis Nomkita, and thanks, Doc. I see a message there from Dr. Jerry Gule. It's unfinished there. I don't know. It says Prof. Ken. Yeah. Go ahead, my brother. Dr. Gule, go ahead.
I don't have my glasses on, so you're gonna need.
Are you not able to express yourself, Dr. Gule?
Grab my glasses. Let's see. What is he saying?
I cannot. Oh, sorry. Now I can
cannot
vocalize.
vocalize. Okay.
I cannot vocalize my question. Sorry, my brother. So the question is, what do we learn from a team behavior and action, and ultimately the supposed no guilty verdict for the VIP protection team? Yo, Dr. Good.
Yeah. Dr. Gulek, you're very naughty. That's a very naughty question. Can I take it in more general terms? I think when you're looking at the team, right, and you're looking internally in terms of the dynamics within the team, it is important to understand that there are a number of factors at play at any given point in time. But one of the factors would be where the power sits, and the other factor would be when you have people or group of people within the team whose core fear. Remember earlier on when I talked about internal in the team, I said you've got to understand what the motivations are, what the core fears are, what the triggers are. So if a core fear is that I would be ostracized, right? And being ostracized mean different things for different people. And so for a Claudelle, for example, my personality type, the only thing that I may be worried about is, if I leave here, where's my next salary going to come from? And then I've got to think about how am I going to create this exit. For somebody else, it may actually feel like a tearing from. And when you have that combination and you have outside of that team, pressure and political pressure, and I'm using the word political in its broadest sense because you've got lots of politics that play out in private sector organizations where that pressure can come from the top. If you have that dynamic playing out, then you will at times see that people get away with things that they shouldn't get away with. If the culture of the organization is such that there are untouchables that are created within the organization, then that behavior is going to play out. And if I'm thinking about an analogy that a very good friend of mine gave me a long time ago when I was going through, it was a hellish situation. And he said to me, he's originally from Brazil. He said to me, his dad taught him this very important lesson. He said, if you go into a garden and you find a snake, you kill the snake. If you go into the garden and the garden is full of snakes, run. So organizations, teams can become overrun by dynamics that are so toxic that what you're referring to could very well play out, and it will play out just about anywhere. The leaders, so if you are either in that situation or you are playing a very important leadership in that situation, it then becomes important to have the sight and to understand what exactly it is that we're dealing with. And why is it that people behave the way they do? So that when we bring interventions in play, that we address the root causes and not the symptoms. I tried to answer you, but you asked me a very tricky one. See, I need my glasses again. If you can carry you. Yeah, no, there are times that one needs to. Just can I just, Prof, maybe just add this as a last, just closing off that thought. In my much younger years, when I was still the beginning phases of my time at the Institute as CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors, I used to say this without thinking further about this. You must stand for what is right, even when you stand alone. As you can see, my hair has become very gray over time. So the wisdom is kicked in. And now I say, you must stand for what is right. You must absolutely not compromise, but you must be wise and smart about how you deal with things. It doesn't help when you are in a situation where you're going to be crushed. You're crushing the purpose in the process. Remember, your job is still to protect that the purpose. Sometimes one need to take a long-term view. Sometimes you're going to be a lot more strategic about how you deal with things. Part of the reason why people in situations like that find themselves in serious trouble is like whistleblowers, for example, is because they didn't think things through and they didn't approach it the right way. You can still get to the outcome that you need to get to without crushing yourself in the process.
Powerful there, Dr. Claudelle. Very important to balance the what and the how, because you may have a very good what, want to find that the way is addressed or the how may put it down. I see a hand there from Dr. Tandiwe Gama. Over to you, Dr. Gama.
Good evening, colleagues. Dr. Claudelle, thank you so much for an insightful presentation. I'm sitting here, if I may just also share that I'm also, I believe I'm in the same sort of space of work that you do. And I'm just guessing here from what I've just heard now. But I'm busy with a group of senior managers. We're looking at aspects of teamwork and team enhancement, team alignment, and all of those. So I must say, I'm also taking in quite a few nuggets from what you've just said, particularly on that diagram. But what I'm learning from the team that I'm dealing with, and perhaps you can just also comment on this, is there's issues of the team collectively meets the targets, performs very well. But once you look at it internally, It's the rot is there. It's the toxicity. It's the egos at play. It's those type of dynamics that, you know, where you find that I don't think they even define for themselves what is the issue at stake, but something is at stake, something is just not gelling, something is not right. But when they have to deliver, they are actually regarded as one of the top teams within the organization. So I think what I'm trying to get at is, what would be your comment in a team where, first and foremost, these are seniors, people that are very smart, people that know their work and are doing it very well, but are not gelling as a team. Are not gelling as a team because, again, there's issues of ego, there's issues of I think just the level of cohesiveness is not there. That resilience is questionable as such. But I think what I'm trying to get at is just comment on that for me, especially in terms of senior leaders within corporates, within organizations.
Could I just quickly ask you a clarifying question? Do you think that they are aware of the fact that they're not gelling? Because some teams are so superficial, they don't even see that things are not going as well as they think it is.
They are aware. That's how they got
Okay.
actually myself into the process. They are aware that they're not gelling. They are aware that something is not working. However, and I think it's maybe I should also just indicate there was an incident that led to a big sort of conflict situation. I think that got them to say, really, we are just, something is not right within the team. We need to get some assistance. And I think that's where we were called in as practitioners and team coaches.
So it sounds to me like you've already identified what the root causes are. In my experience, what I find is generally most helpful is to first help the individuals to see themselves and to see how they are showing up and how they may be a problem. So if everybody realizes, oops, so Claudelle realizes, so one of my things, for example, is that I am far more aware now that I can come across as cold even when I think I'm being very warm. So understanding that that may create a blockage for others. And how do I then do something about changing that, right? So I generally find that if the individuals can see themselves and start working on themselves, they can start to see how things, how they contribute to the problem, because they're colluding. They're absolutely colluding in creating the problem. There are tools out there. I don't know if I did mention the Enneagram. I find it very useful because you can use it for the individual, you can use it for the team. There are others as well, but I would say, especially for senior people, just have a conversation and let's talk about the conflict itself generally, especially when there's underlying maturity, I'm going to call it that, issues, that it's not sustainable. That helps a little.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tandiwe. Thank you so much, Dr. Gama. If I may ask Dr. Claudelle, how difficult, I will ask two questions. Obviously, probably they might seem as a very simplistic question. Other colleagues may say, how can a professor ask such a question? But I've got a reason why I'm asking. Number one, how difficult it is to lead yourself, or how people find it so difficult to lead themselves. And secondly, what causes teams to be toxic? Is it because of a leader? Is it because of some other team members? It's because of environment? It's because of what? But I know that someone might say that maybe
All of the above.
all of the above.
all of the above, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me start with why is it so difficult? I think for me, and I can only speak really truly from a perspective of self and my reality. The ability to look at yourself with all the ugliness and the shadow it's really hard to get there, because most of us have been raised to think of ourselves as, I'm a good person. And when we think in absolutes, if I think of myself as a good person, I am thinking of myself in an absolute, which basically means, where's the bad stuff? You can't have bad stuff in a good person if you're thinking about the goodness as an absolute. But to get to a point where you start to become real with self and being able to face the reality that I am human. And what does my humanity mean? My humanity means that I have lots of limitations. I have lots of blind spots. I can only see myself so far. And once you're there, then you can start exploring self with curiosity. So now I can start to see myself far better than I could when I thought of myself very one-dimensionally. And I think the difficulty is the conditioning around I must present as good, because that is what everybody says you must be. And nobody says to you, you have to look at your shadow, because it exists. It's there, whether you like it or not. But that brutal honesty with self is, I think, the first difficult step. And most of us don't have that mirror being put up in front of us, and this confrontation. Because what I've just said, I've spoken about myself, but I'm acutely aware of the fact that I am confronting you when I say you're not a good person. It's very hard to hear, but it is a necessary confrontation, because that is where the self, being able to see self, starts. What makes teams toxic? It really is a combination of factors, right? So you can have the level of maturity, you can talk through that lens, you can talk about how organizations, in terms of the cultures that are being driven by the leadership, inevitably bring out the worst in people. Like, so think about the Wells Fargo case. The employees ended up overcharging people without the knowledge, right? So without the client's knowledge. And initially, the blame was on the employees, they being greedy because they're wanting to push up their bonuses. Would it be true for some? Yeah. And once again, I'll remind you that earlier on I talked about we may have certain behavioral, say the same behavioral patterns, but our motivations may be different. So you can have two employees who do exactly the same thing. For the one, it is about greed. For the other, it is fear. Because management has created an expectation. It's not so much about getting that bonus as it is about the fear that has been created within the system. And when you have created a system where people cannot speak up, so look at what's happening in the United States at the moment. So I'm watching from the outside in, and there's some things that I'm like, what else do you expect is going to happen when certain behaviors play out? So you can have a lot of different combinations of things that would create toxicity. So if you've got an exco team, like the good doctor gave as an example, where she's currently dealing with, often what happens is if the organization employs very consciously employ go-getters, because that is what we value. then you're going to get the go-getters, but you may not have the emotional maturity that you should have also have looked for at the beginning. And I worked with a team in one of our multinationals. It was a sub-team not so long ago, and had individual conversations with people within the team, and our people crying and describing what is happening. And what was clear, what has happened is that at the top layer, what you had was people who are technically strong and people who are go-getters. They are high performers. But when it comes to leading people, they were actually very weak. They had no sight of what was going on within the broader team. And when I revealed some of the stuff to them, they were shocked. I'm like, but you live with these people, you should have seen this. And then a while after that, I read an article about the same organization where they were talking as a case study, where they were talking about the recruitment process of yonks ago, where they were specifically looking for go-getters, and how you had a strong team at the top and everything crumbled at the bottom. And if everything crumbles at the bottom, the whole thing collapses eventually. So long term, it is not sustainable. I talk a lot. I'm really sorry.
And we love listening to you because we are learning a lot. That is very, very, very good. I don't see any hand, and I think maybe we can give you time. Oh, is it a hand from Dr. Tandio? Over to you, my sister. Sorry, I didn't see you. After Dr. Gama, I'll ask you to give your response and also your closing remarks, and we'll close the session. Over to you, Dr. Gama. Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm just enjoying this presentation because, yeah. But I think from what you just said, Dr. Claudelle, what I've also found with some of these corporates, and perhaps it's not something that's done intentionally, but somehow, whether through oversight or accident, it does happen. Like in your case, when you said they tend to intentionally go out there and recruit go-getters. And then when down the line they sit with go-getters who are out there, but emotional maturity is lacking, then it becomes a problem. What I've also found in my experience is that when you look into the personalities of the team members, you find that they all sort of almost lean towards one type of personality. There isn't any sort of complementary personalities so that the different personalities make up a huge team. And this is what we're also finding out. When you give them some of these psychometric tests and you look at their personalities, you can tell that they were employed by someone thinking that almost attracting what they thought was the best and attracting the same type of personalities in a team. And that has proven over time that it tends to be a problem down the line.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you. It becomes very problematic, and this is where we need to help organizations see why diversity is so important. And that when you have a dominant style within the team, that the team would have its own blind spots. So your job in helping that team is to see that the dominance of this has pros and cons. Now, as a team, how are we going to work on those blind spots and those areas where we need to develop further? And then over time, how can we shift and bring a little more balance in the team? But yeah, it starts with the recruitment process and what it is that we're looking for. And often it's mindless, but it's also about with people that don't understand the balance. And I hope you all saw the picture behind me. Left and right brain. So we want to bring whole brain into the organization. So Prof, in closing remarks, I really want to encourage each one of you, if you don't already have a practice or you've allowed the practice to fall by the wayside, Make sure that you have got something that helps you to come back to yourself. Something that helps you to reflect and constantly look at self so that you can magnify and keep on growing the vessel that carries the purpose, because your purpose is so important. And where the world is today, we're not just in a storm, it's a hurricane out there. With all the global shifts that are happening, and it's translating in so many different forms. The people you are responsible for in terms of those who you have charge over from a leadership perspective. Lead leadership now more than ever before. But for you to be able to show up with solid presence, with calmness, you need to have that practice that helps you to ground yourself, to see yourself, and to continually to increase your self-knowledge, your self-awareness, and to self-regulate on a constant basis. I will end off with those words, Prof, and hope that everybody would be able to take something from today's conversation.
Thank you so much, my sister. Thank you so much, and thank you so much. So insightful, informative, as you always do. So challenging and impactful. Thank you so much, and thank you for inspiring me about the ballroom and Latin, because actually at some stage I was a professional. I never told you.
I don't believe you. A professional
Yes,
never leaves
yes.
the dance.
I'm a ballroom and Latin dancer, and yeah, I used to compete
Wow.
at a professional level, but I stopped. But now that you spoke about it, I'm definitely going to go back, because I thought I'm too old now. I think I can still go back. And I like the way you use that analogy of dancing to leadership, because when you look at it, partners are holding each other, the ability to push and pull, the support structure, the rhythm going together. It's beautiful. People who really who are dancers or who watch ballroom dancers. So please do tell us when there are competition. I'd like to take some colleagues even just to go and sit and watch, because it's beautiful when you look the partners holding each other. There's no falling there. You can think that no, the other one is falling, but another and at a professional level, you never even see if there is another one who took a misstep, because they support each other. So
They
that's how
cover each
leadership
other.
should be. Encourage each other. So that's how leadership should be. And thank you so much, as I've said, the way you encouraged us tonight. And really, we don't take it for granted, your availability in the midst of your busy schedule. So thank you so much. And obviously, you are part of us. We'll see each other, hopefully, the book launch. Dr. Gama is one of the contributors. There are so many contributors here, and it's a powerful book. It's a powerful book. So thank you so much, my sister. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The session is adjourned now until we meet again next week, Wednesday. We'll be having another powerful speaker and another interesting topic. So please do join us, as I said, on those who've joined us for the first time. Please don't make a mistake of not coming back. These are super master classes. We always learn something together here as leaders, and also encouraging each other. Dr. Gama, are you raising your hand, or are you?
No, I'm just saying peace.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for the beautiful session.
Oh, it's just. I'll be using that. I'll be using that next time. Thank you for teaching me. Ladies and gentlemen, the session is adjourned now until next week, Wednesday. May God bless you, and may God bless Africa. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.